Welcome to Cryptic Accounts, a podcast by paranoid people for paranoid people. And this week on the show, we've got Ken Johnston, Richard Hoagland, NASA, and the moon. I'm Patrick Ryan, joined by Dennis Cheney.
Oh boy, this is a good one. This is a good one. We
Yeah,
haven't done it yet, but I know it's going to be a good one. We have never done Hoagland,
I was
and
gonna
we've
say,
touched.
I assumed you were probably familiar with him.
Yeah, you can say that. I'm familiar with most things, although I always like to see, like, in history as it's really happening, what like the cryptic take is on it. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I'm excited to hear that.
Yeah, well, he wasn't a main intent. He was, you'll see. I got sidetracked, and then I was like, well, we got to talk about this guy for a second now.
This is I love by paranoid people for paranoid people, but this is also like the ADHD patient's guide to the cryptic universe.
I
It's
mean,
the way I think of this show, the way we
maybe we
both
should
work.
change the slug line or whatever. What was it? The
No.
ADHD what?
It's just like it's like your attention deficit guide through the paranormal, which is the way all of our episodes go. It's like, well, I started on this and then I ended up on that, but then I went back to this.
People
And
seem to be
that's
liking it, so maybe I don't know. You know what? That's not. I can't say you're wrong in anything you just said in explaining the show. That
I
is.
mean, that's how I feel. I'm always like, what's happening until it's like 4,000 words of script, and then I'm like, oh, okay, we got a show.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, that's the first little bit. Yeah, there's a lot of confusion. Definitely, definitely.
It's like, well, this is interesting, but I can't just read this thing. And then it's like, well, now I'm into three different things. I got one coming up. It might be a bonus episode, but like we never promised those. And it might be next week's episode, but I got one that definitely started out as three different things because that's what the article was about. Three big topics from like a major publication. And it sent me in like 12 different directions. And I'm like using all of my brain force to put it all into one episode.
Well, yeah, start out with one thing, and then it's just like I have questions as I like start reading through, and then I start looking up the answers to those questions, and then it just yeah.
Oh yeah, exactly. Like our Genesis Revisited. I mean, that I'm gonna you edit that down into like one giant episode, but that first that first part of the three parts really could have been half an hour. It's just that I was like, what, really? And I just like happened to go get like sources that like prove this stuff. I think it's a good, I don't know, I like what we're doing, and thank you for liking and subscribing. We've had our best month ever the last couple months. So I guess I'm gonna close the Wizard of Oz curtain here and just let you do your thing.
All right. Yeah, thank you everybody for listening, for watching, for being here. We appreciate it. We're seeing all the comments and stuff. We like that. There's so much stuff coming in. We're not getting to all of it quick enough. We see a fair majority of it though. So thank you. Keep on doing that. Yeah. Cryptic A podcast at Gmail is the email address. And then yeah, Facebook, all that stuff. So yeah, you ready to get into what I got into this week, which was the moon. This all started with the moon, Dennis.
You're building this nice moon center of the earth wheelhouse that you got going on. I know that you're not just this two-dimensional character, but definitely you got this good like grind going on the
I
moon
have
here.
really gotten into like the lost civilizations, lost cities, stuff like that here lately.
You do a good job too of being like, I'm interested in the moon, like 1 week, and then like 5 weeks later being like, I want to tell you all about the moon. You're doing a good job.
Well, I mean, this is one. The moon's been something I've been reading about for a long time, and it's just finally time I started putting together some of this information into cryptic episodes. Which I'm gonna have another moon episode. I can tell you right now. There's already another moon episode, like pretty
I,
much ready to go.
I think about the moon every night.
Do you? Is that yeah? All right. So in the 60s and 70s, that is, the U.S. space program was really into studying the lunar surface. I don't know if you're into that. They were super into finding out what was going on with the moon. All about it. NASA wanted to know. Couldn't get enough of the moon. So NASA launched the Apollo program during that time. The program ran from 1961 to 1972. They landed a man on the moon in 69. Now, there have been a ton of mysteries and oddities surrounding the Apollo program, and even more so, the moon. Now, there were a ton of people involved in this program. It was massive, and one of those many people was Ken Johnston. Ken was an aerospace engineer, pilot, and astronaut trainer, as well as one of four civilian astronaut consultant pilots involved in training of the astronauts for Apollo 11. He was employed by Grumman Aircraft Corporation. He worked cockpit and instrument training primarily. He also tested the lunar mission module in vacuum chambers for safety, and he trained the astronauts to land it during this as well. So we would later, after all that, take on the role of Director of Data and Photo Control Department at the Lunar Receiving Lab. There they processed and analyzed different types of samples from the moon, as well as photos and videos. Johnston said that he had handled photos from 5 Apollo missions. So these were primarily stored, curated, cataloged, and often sent to scientists afterwards for further analysis. So
Okay,
when
we
the
have a good source. Go ahead.
yeah, yeah, this guy was involved in the space program very early on, the Apollo missions. Um, and yeah, he's been very open about his time there. He took him a while to come out, but he did finally. So when the Apollo program started to wind down in the early 70s and samples had pretty much been sorted and cataloged, that's when Bud Laskawa, who was Ken's supervisor, okay, so one day Bud walks into Ken's office and tells him that he needs Ken to just go ahead and destroy all that remained of the photo archive,
Oh, interesting.
with a special emphasis on a set of glossy 8x10 prints. Bud said to make sure that those particular ones never saw the light of day.
We got burning trash coming from the NASA building.
So, according to Johnston, this is because those prints specifically had some very strange anomalies in them, and NASA did not want the general public seeing them. They felt so strongly about this that they would often doctor photos before they were released to the public. They would extensively manipulate and alter the images to hide structures of non human origins on the moon.
Whoa.
Now, Ken has spoken at length about this, and I want to quote one from the 90s that he did with Pavarthi Benu.
Let me
Uh,
say something. Hold on one second.
okay,
So it, we might have the worst system of government. So like we have the
go on.
we have the Freedom of Information Act, which is probably why they felt like they had to destroy these things. But how historic for the first country to go to the moon to have photos, how historic would those photos be? Like at least in the Soviet Union they wouldn't somehow I'm here again. They wouldn't like destroy things like that. They just keep it secret until like the government toppled. Now we all know all the secret stuff, right? Like we we know that we have like a responsibility to share stuff with our citizens, so they're like just destroy it. And it's like, oh, and it makes me so mad that they destroyed pictures of aliens, because it's like, at least keep them around in a secret vault. At least be the jerk that doesn't let people have access to it, and then someday in the future maybe we'll have access to it. It makes me so mad these things were destroyed.
Well, and this is not the first person from NASA or high levels of government to come out and say this stuff's happening. And it just doesn't matter. No, most people don't care. It's just easier not to think about it, I think.
No, it's not. But also, like, I guess if you get what I'm saying, like, you don't have to destroy it. You could just lie to us. You could just lie. It's already probably against the law to destroy it. Just keep it in a secret vault and lie to me, and then someday we'll have the first picture of an alien. You know what I mean? Like,
Well, I think that probably still exists somewhere. I don't think this meant they destroyed everything. I think this means what is being kept in this record keeping part. And
Okay.
again, they're disseminating it to scientists. Like, it's getting passed around the government and stuff. Like, whoever, I don't think these were the only copies. I think these were the copies in the archives that the general public
Okay.
would have access to. I don't know that. I'm just assuming based on what they were doing here. It doesn't make sense that those were the only copies. It more seemed like those were probably the only copies there. So you
Okay.
may still get that moment someday, Dennis.
That's all I want.
This is when the government topples. You
I
get to
just
see
want the
your
government
your
to
your moon
topple
based
and
stuff.
admit all their lies. So he gave an interview with Pavarotti Benu.
Pavarthi Banu,
Okay.
who's a researcher, and okay, so this is him talking about his time at NASA and being in this photo department. So, quote, once we were done with the first 3 missions, I was put in charge of photographing and documenting their exact location. One day, my boss ordered me to destroy these images. I reminded him that the government had paid for them and that they should be made public, to which he replied, no, get rid of it. I don't care what you think. It was because there were elements in the pictures that were unexplainable. You can see the lunar anomalies too. It looks like something has been smudged out. Way before Photoshop, they would paint things out. Once, when I walked into the photo lab, I saw a woman painting something out. She called herself a stripper and said that she was paid for it. This really upset me as I was in charge of keeping a record of things. I guess that's why they call me a whistleblower.
What a narc. Calling the cops on a stripper. Let the woman make her living.
Not that kind of. I don't think you understood what I was talking about there, Dennis.
um, yeah, that is true. In fact, oh my gosh, we could almost. I feel like we keep ratcheting up what we research, but like if we ever took if we ever just like drink a cold glass of milk and wanted to like come back down to like 72 degrees, we could do a whole episode on like Photoshop before Photoshop, like the stuff NASA edits out, the stuff that like the Soviet Union like they edited out whole people from the
Yeah,
historical record. Yeah, we could do a whole episode on the stripper stuff. We could have just a stripper episode, basically.
that would actually probably be a fun episode.
Yeah, maybe I'll
Again,
put that together. Yeah,
that would be a fun episode.
once I get done discovering what where the dinosaurs are now on different planets,
Oh yeah.
I'll get back to historic photoshopping.
Um. So okay, so Ken's boss tells him get rid of all this stuff. Strippers, he's seen them, smudging stuff out. Ken didn't listen to his boss though. Instead, he kept a set of the photos he was told to destroy for himself in his personal collection for evidence of what he witnessed. He left and would move on with his life, and for over 20 years, he would tell no one of what he saw, learned, and had in his possession. He was scared to let anyone know of their existence. Until 1995, when he decided to attend a lecture by Richard Hoagland. Now, I didn't want to get sidetracked, as I was saying, with Richard Hoagland, but then I looked him up, and now we have to talk about him.
Yeah, you can't just drop that name.
Yeah, I won't spend like a ton of time again. Although we could have done a whole episode just on this one guy.
He
And
will eventually be an episode.
he probably will be, honestly. But I just kind of figured for fun, we could just kind of gloss over just Wikipedia, basically. Just kind of get an idea of who this guy is that Ken is now taking his only copies of moon photos to in 1995.
Yeah, and that's such a Richard Hoagland story. Is that he's the one guy with the one copy that.
Well, it really happened.
I'm waiting to find out what happened to these copies. Yeah,
Ken Johnston is a real person. I mean,
yeah,
he corroborated that he did give the photos to Richard. Like, that part isn't made up at all.
right.
So Richard was born in 1945. He's an author and big proponent of various conspiracy theories about NASA, lost civilizations on the moon and Mars, which right there, that was where they got me. Like, as soon as I read he was into that, I'm like, well, he's kind of cryptic accounts, isn't he? He kind of is. So he's a bit controversial. his highest level of education was high school, but somehow, and again, I didn't get too bogged down in it. We're gonna have to figure out why. He didn't go past high school, but at 19, he was the curator of astronomy and space science at the Springfield Science Museum from 1964 to 1967. He was like one of the youngest, if not the youngest person to hold such a position. And then he was the assistant director at the Gingras Science Center in West Hartford, Connecticut in 67 and 68. So, like, I don't know how he got really into being in charge of all this stuff. And I couldn't find anything about like he was exemplary in high school. I couldn't find anything really, but again, I didn't dig too far. So maybe there is a good story onto how he was able to transition into this.
Yeah, this is not an uncommon thing in this realm where someone's biography doesn't seem to match up with where they end up.
Yeah, so he's curating museums, and then by like 69, he's a science advisor to CBS News during the Apollo program from 68 to 71. So it actually started in 68. In 1968, he filed a copyright registration for a planetarium presentation and script for a show called The Grand Tour. Not the one you're thinking of. It was like a planetarium show, though. Not the car one.
Oh,
I got really excited there for a second when I read that. And then I was like, oh,
you think of the
planetarium.
Grand Turismo?
No, Grand Tour is, no, The Grand Tour.
Oh,
Grand
okay.
Tour is a show. It was on BBC. Now there's an American version. Never mind.
Oh, yeah. Oh, Richard Branson. Or no, Charles Swanson. That guy. That yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Oh, okay. So he made a bunch of these. They were super successful. He designed a room with special equipment to display relative positions of the Earth, Mars, and the mariners during their trip. And because of that, was able to then contract with NASA to relay the pictures of the Martian surface on a near live feed to a general audience, as well as co-hosting a radio program covering Mariner 4's 1965 flyby. So he's like doing a ton of stuff very early on, like in his 20s. In 76, he initiated, and this was just a fun one. He initiated a letter campaign to President Gerald Ford to rename the first space shuttle from Constitution to the Enterprise because he was a big Star Trek fan,
Yes.
and it worked.
Yes.
Which I didn't realize that's how that happened.
He is my people.
That's that guy, though. So he went on to write a couple successful books, The Monuments of Mars, A City on the Edge of Forever, published in 87, and he co-authored Dark Mission, The Secret History of NASA. He apparently wrote Monument while in LA County Jail. This allegation was made by someone in the know, the original publisher of Hoagland's book. The publisher is Richard Grossinger of North Atlantic Books, and the allegation is contained in an online catalog written in 2011.
Whoa. Let me, just for people who don't know, if you've ever seen the face on Mars or the pyramids on Mars, those are real pictures, but you know about them because of Richard Hoagland.
Yeah, he was
That's
the first one.
Yeah.
The first notable person to spot it.
Right.
Yeah, I get to that. But okay, so I love the quote from the director. Okay, or from his publishing guy. So here's another little secret about monuments. The only way the thing was ever going to get written was that Hoagland went to prison for one of his inexplicable and weird scams, ostensibly something about a stolen rental car and a New York planetarium credit card. Whether it really, which I mean, right there, I'm just like, that's a great story. Whether it really happened or not, as reported, whether it was really a scam or not, and whether he was really guilty or sentenced fairly or not, the answer to the latter is definitely not. And he had an attorney involved in his own weird paranoid cosmic conspiracy theories, including Hoagland. In the end, he was incarcerated over a New York State warrant that he chose to flee to the Golden State rather than defend in situ. He was apprehended in Berkeley when stopped for having a cardboard rear license plate, refused to plea bargain, and so got housed in LA County Jail for over a year. Admittedly, my version of the story is cobbled out of hearsay from a variety of semi reliable sources, but it roughly tracks some events that actually happened. He was in jail. That's where I addressed my mail to him regarding the book, and he did write much of the book there.
Making the most out of prison.
I mean, he really did, right?
I wonder if NASA sent him things like if everyone's just like sending stuff to this jail. Maybe he
He's
was in jail because he knew too much.
he sounds like, I mean, based on a little bit, he sounds like he'd be a really fun guy to hang out with.
Oh yeah, dude, I'd love to meet half. Oh man, Aleister Crowley, Richard Hoagland, all these old school paranormal people. Art Bell. Oh my gosh. Oh man, I would just, I would love it.
Maybe someday. But I mean, most of them are still alive. I think all of those are still alive, aren't they?
I think they're literally, well, I think they're all dead.
Oh
I actually don't know about Richard Hoagland.
no,
I think
Richard Hoagland's still alive.
okay.
I
Well,
thought you.
he's definitely the only one of the three that I just mentioned.
Oh
Yeah.
well, I don't know what I was thinking, but
Well, maybe we should reach out to Richard Hoagland,
we could.
have a talk.
He was a regular on Coast to Coast as a science advisor until 2015 when he was replaced. Hoagland claims the source of so-called NASA cover-ups with relations to the face of Mars and other related structures is a result of a report commissioned by NASA, authored by Brookings Institution, the so-called Brookings Report. The 1960 report entitled Proposed Studies on the Implications of Peaceful Space Activities for Human Affairs is claimed by Hoagland on page 216 of the report to instruct NASA to deliberately withhold from the public any evidence it may find of extraterrestrial activity, specifically on the moon, Mars, or Venus.
Ooh, Venus. We're back to Venus.
Back to our old Valiant Thor, a little throwback there. Hoagland has also proposed a form of physics he calls hyperdimensional physics, which he claims represents a more complete implementation of James Clerk Maxwell's original 20 quaternion, did I say that right? Equations, quaternion?
I'm not sure, man.
Quaternion? Somebody's losing their mind. I'm sorry. Instead of the original Maxwell's equation as amended by Oliver Heaviside, commonly taught today. So these ideas are rejected by mainstream physics, the mainstream physics community, as unfounded. Hoagland claims the faces of Mars is part of a city built on Cydonia Planitia, consisting of very large pyramids and mounds arranged in geometric patterns. To Hoagland, this is evidence that an advanced civilization might once have existed on Mars. In the years since its discovery, the face has been near universally accepted as an optical illusion to many. And an example of the psychological phenomenon of pareidolia, similar optical illusions can be found in the geology of Earth. Examples include the Old Man of the Mountain, the Pedra de Gavia, and Stock Levenish.
And the old man in the moon.
Yes.
My mother kind of has pareidolia. She sees faces in trees.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. She'll be like, I see, and she knows that it's probably not happening, but she's like, I see faces, and then sometimes I'll look and be like, oh, I see what you're talking about. Yeah,
I mean,
it's the human desire to like find agency in things and faces and things that aren't there. We tend to take random patterns and piece them together. Although this whole face on the moon thing is pretty disputed because there are some pretty clear pictures that make it look
you mean
like
Mars?
on the Mars. Yeah, exactly.
Oh yeah, no, I don't agree with this. Again, this is just I'm skimming Wikipedia basically, just because I didn't want to do a whole Hoagland episode. But again, we kind of need to know who this guy is for me to keep on talking to you about what's going to happen with Ken.
Right.
Don't forget about Ken Johnston. We're coming back to Ken.
Please don't forget about Ken Johnston.
Don't
the guy
forget about
who
Ken.
threw away a bunch of NASA photos but kept them secretly.
Still alive as well. Both of them still alive.
Ooh.
So although the Pioneer 10 plaque was designed entirely by Carl Sagan, Linda Salzman Sagan, and Frank Drake, Hoagland has inaccurately asserted that he co-created the plaque with Eric Burgess. In 1990, Hoagland tried to take credit for the plaque, asserting that Carl for many years, there's the quote, Carl for many years been taking public credit for the Pioneer plaque, which of course Eric Burgess and I conceived. Later that year, Hoagland went so far as to claim he designed the plaque when he said, quote, Carl was involved with Eric and me in the design of the message. Uh, Carl's own account is at odds with Hoagland's design claims, stating that the design itself was created by Carl Sagan and Frank Drake, with the artistic help of Sagan's then wife, Linda Salzman Sagan, without mentioning Hoagland at all. Sagan's own correspondence regarding the matter also contradict Hoagland's claims, specifically saying, quote, he did not contribute one bit of data towards the message design. Carl recalls similarly adding that all Hoagland did with regards to the plaque was support me and say it was a good idea. Hoagland's website still incorrectly credits him as co-creator of the Pioneer plaque.
He seemed awfully close to the creation of this plaque.
Look, I don't know. That's just what everybody said. I didn't really take a firm stance on how I thought this fell on that one.
I mean, I'm not gonna go all in on who made the plaque. You've seen the plaque, right? It's like a man and a woman holding
Yeah.
hands. Yeah. Like but it is weird that Eric Burgess, Carl Sagan, his wife, and then Drake, famous Canadian rapper, all these
I
people,
don't think it's the same one.
all of these people, they seem to be like they're not like, okay, Hoagland was nowhere to be seen. We don't know this guy. They're like, okay, well, he was like around,
And he
but
thought it
like,
was a good idea, but
yeah,
he didn't do anything.
right. He seems to be like close to all these people who made this plaque. So like, I would guess that maybe he had some input.
Yeah. It kind of seems like he was off again. Yeah, you're right. He was awfully close to the situation.
He was, yeah, he's pretty close for someone who's like a nut job, right? Like he seems to know all these people who are working on this plaque. So my guess is he had like some ideas that other people like
Well,
remembered that they had first, and
they
uh,
also might be distancing themselves kind of based on some of the other stuff that surrounds
yep.
Richard. So in 2011, researcher Andrew Johnson created an in-depth point-by-point denouncement of Richard Hoagland's misappropriation of his and Judy Wood's work in a speech given by Hoagland in Amsterdam on Sunday, April 3rd, 2011. At various points in his nearly 3 hour lecture, Hoagland presented various theories, research, and data originally and previously created by Wood and or Johnson as his own with no prior consent given. So he starts copying other people's stuff. This kind of seems to happen some. Whether they're having the same idea or not, I don't know. At various times, including in 2013 in July on Coast to Coast AM, had claimed that the idea to drop a feather and a hammer simultaneously on the moon was his idea. In actual fact, the stunt was thought up primarily by Joe Allen with some help from Dave Scott and Jim Irwin. On Hoagland's own digital podcast, he claimed on November 11th, 2015, to have coined the phrase, on the internet, nobody knows you're a dog. A simple fact check of this shows that Peter Steiner first published this phrase in a cartoon in The New Yorker in July of 1993.
Okay, that's like the character assassination's going a bit far. Like, okay, maybe he was close to the whole plaque thing. Maybe he misremembered because we know he was probably involved with the NASA moon landing.
Let me say,
like the dude's not a plagiarist because
look. I'm gonna come full circle. I'm putting both sides. I said he helped us. I acknowledge we helped figure out we saw the faces on Mars, all that. So, despite all the righteous degradation of Mr. Hoagland's scientific and academic credentials, Mr. Hoagland has opened the subject of anomalies on Mars to many like minded individuals who would otherwise not have given a moment's thought to Mars or its possible history. Decades of scientific research have added weight to the scale on Mr. Hoagland's side in terms of water, anomalistic geology, and other discoveries on the topic of Mars and its past.
But he plagiarized that 1993 dog cartoon, though.
I just thought that was
The
a funny
man
one.
is
Look,
ruined.
I didn't dig that one up. That was literally like that was a weird thing that Wikipedia included as something. I'm like,
This man is a scoundrel. That is maybe the most hilarious fact check, quote unquote fact check that I've ever heard in my life. Is that he told a joke online, and they're like, a fact check shows that joke came from a 1993 cartoon featuring a dog, and it's like,
it
okay.
did it did make me chuckle when I read it. I'm like, I'm gonna read that. We're gonna
It's like,
talk about
how
that
much
for a second.
stuff do people say in like everyday life that's like maybe from something they vaguely remember in the back of their mind?
Look, it's all original content all the time with all of us, Dennis. We're nobody's
This
recycling
this
anything.
dude is literally getting called out for a 22-year-old
Yep.
comic book script.
Well, I don't think it's that he. It's not that. I think it's that he planted his flag in the hill of saying that he came up with that he coined that phrase. I don't think
Yeah,
it's that
but
he's saying it, but he's like, I came up with it. I don't know. I didn't listen to the episodes to hear if he was bragging on it real hard. Like, I don't know.
not even if he was, it's like, who would remember the comic strip they read 20 years
The
ago?
internet remembers, Dennis.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So that's a little bit about Richard. Let's get back to
Let's
Ken
get back
Johnston.
to Ken Johnston.
So Ken's been hiding these photos for over 20 years. He goes to Richard's seminar. Richard's talking about moon stuff, Mars stuff. After the seminar ends, Ken found Hoagland and presented his photo set from his time on the Apollo program. Hoagland looked them over with Johnston. Richard was intrigued. They definitely showed evidence of alien presence on the moon. Hoagland claims that he was allowed to take scans of the prints, which he says allowed him to uncover further details on analysis. And he would write of the photos in his 2007 book, Dark Mission, saying, in scanning Ken's priceless Apollo 14 sea prints, I discovered that the computer could see what the human eye could not. Incredible geometric detail in the pitch black areas, like the lunar sky. The sensitivity of modern CCD imaging technology and even commercially available image scanners, coupled with the amazing enhancement capabilities of state of the art commercial software like Adobe's Photoshop, allowed the invisible detail buried in these supposedly black layers of these 30-year-old emulsions to ultimately be revealed. A democratization of technology that no censor at NASA could have possibly foreseen over more than 30 years ago. So Hoagland would then go on to exhibit and lecture extensively on these photos, claiming that he had found all manner of anomalies in them that had never been uncovered before. But there's been quite a bit of skepticism towards these bold claims. One excerpt from Rational Wiki has pointed out one of the problems these scans of Hoagland's claims as follows. Of course, scanning cannot reveal invisible details if it is truly invisible. Hoagland has made a career out of trumpeting the fact of his scans of Ken Johnston's collection show that the official scans do show the official scans what the official scans do not. But of course, he's comparing, on the one hand, a professional scanned image from an original negative or an inner negative done in a clean room, and on the other hand, a photo print stored in a ring binder for 23 years, then pulled out and scanned on Hoagland's office scanner, the glass of which is quite clearly contaminated. For use as PowerPoint slides, Hoagland typically slams up the brightness, a procedure guaranteed to reveal any scanner contamination wherever the image is black.
That sounds awful skeptic-y.
See, and that's what I thought too. And I think more of the problem is the terminology that he uses when he describes. It's not invisible. You just can't see it until it's been enhanced a little bit
I
to
mean, what I imagine is you take a photo of the moon, you're like in Apollo 13 or whatever, and you're going around the edge trying to make it back to Earth. You take a photo of the moon, it's on real film, and there's like a craft. And then some dude at NASA sits there with a black marker and goes, "No one will ever notice this," and blacks it out. And then we get the technology later to see, like, oh, there's clearly a black marker. We can kind of look through it. And then Rational Wiki goes, "Oh, but also his scanner was dirty." It's like I want to see the photos for myself.
We're gonna get to them. We're gonna get to
Yeah.
them. I didn't
Oh,
want to, mainly just because I wanted to talk about a lot of it first. Because I mean, we always, I think, do a pretty good job of describing photos, but I didn't want it to be for because we have a lot of people that just listen. So I didn't want it to be too intensive. I kind of wanted to give the whole story, and then we can go through and describe some of these photos. But they
oh,
do
definitely.
exist. They're a
And
real
we
thing. You can find them.
and we always include links for those of you
Hmm.
listening. I guess what I'm saying isn't, oh, I want to let's talk about the photos, but I guess what I'm saying is, like, I don't buy this whole, if
I
you
don't.
put in a written word like, oh, it's because the scanner's dirty, it's like, I like, let me, because a lot of these skeptics, they're like professional skeptics, they're skeptical
Yeah.
of everything for every reason, so it's like, I want to see what you're talking about before I believe you.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And we're not going to go through all of them because some of them, I'll be honest, I looked at them, I'm like, I could kind of see what you're talking about there, but also I could see this contamination thing as well. Uh, so the scans, like as we kind of been told, they've been written off by skeptics as merely showing imperfections and artifacts in the scanning surface, such as blemishes or fibers. Regardless of what Hoagland's scan shows, though, they were responsible for making Johnston's photos public. And Johnston himself would then begin to be more open with his original collection, releasing them to the public for free in 2015 and then going on to donate them to the Roswell International UFO Research Center and Museum. Those who have looked at the photographs for themselves have claimed to see all manner of strange things in them, including satellite dishes, statues, ruins, buildings, and even lunar alien bases with visible lights and structures.
Wow.
So, in the meantime, Johnston had traveled and has traveled and lectured extensively on what he calls a NASA cover up, as well as conducting various interviews. One of the most well known and controversial of Johnston's claims is that there were photos from Apollo 14's mission that supposedly showed an alien base in the Tsiolkovsky crater, which is an enormous crater on the backside of the moon. Johnston claims that when he first saw the photographs, he could see lights and a pentagonal cluster of domes, showing that it was clearly a facility of some sort. But the next day, it had all been doctored to erase it. According to him, it had essentially been airbrushed out. This claim has also become controversial because, according to NASA Dennis, Apollo 14 never flew over that crater and it was never photographed. So, what are you talking about, Ken?
Didn't Okay. Well, that's one of those things where it's like only one person has access to the information, but
Yep. Another person that's calling you a liar.
yeah, didn't every Apollo mission, though, they had to circle the moon to get the
I think so.
velocity back to Earth.
But I think you're not seeing their photographs aren't seeing the entire surface of the moon as they fly by. You would have to fly pretty much directly over it.
Uh,
That's what they're saying is, well, we didn't fly right over that. I don't know what you're talking about. But this
so are
dude
they
who worked in the
claiming that
photo
these are
lab is saying, nah, man, I saw it. We went over it. I saw some stuff in that crater. And then the next day, that stuff was not in that crater. Now they're saying the photo doesn't even exist.
so do we, and without getting into the photos just yet, do we have,
He doesn't have a copy of that photo.
okay,
I
do
don't
we have,
think there is one that talks about something similar that he's talking about a cluster of lights and stuff, which is actually the first photo we're going to get into, but it is not from Apollo 14. It is actually from Apollo 15. and
Well,
it's not
cool.
in that crater, but it's a similar thing, the kind of what he's talking about.
Okay.
So, but yeah, I couldn't find it. He doesn't have a copy of that photo, or I don't know what happened to it. I couldn't find anything anywhere talking about that. But okay, so this one from Apollo 14 or Apollo 15. This is supposedly of a lunar base. So this is of I'm not sure what they're doing here, but you can see the I don't know what you call that. What's the thing that they're going to land in, or the pod that's I
The
don't know the
lander, the
capsule.
lunar
No, I mean
lander, the
that's the
cap.
capsule. There's that first picture right there.
Oh, the capsule. Yeah.
I mean, I guess it's just the capsule, right?
It's a real history test here. Yeah, I think definitely the thing they land in is called the
Well, yeah.
lander, and then I think the thing that floats around waiting for them to redock is the capsule.
Okay. Because yeah, that's the top of the rocket when they're shooting it up. Because this is before they were using shuttles.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you can see here uh, that they've zoomed in on what they're calling a lunar base, which is this weird kind of cluster of what looks like lights. So to me, that kind of, and if you'll scroll down farther, I have a blown up color enhanced version
Okay.
where you
Yeah.
can see it a little bit better.
Was this taken originally in black and white or color?
I believe it would have been in black and white. I guess it would have been the 60s. I guess it could have been in color.
One thing I would like to investigate outside of this is like, because this comes up in a lot of what we research, is what is color enhancement? Because they'll like add color to like 1910 videos now.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't understand. Like, are you uncovering information that's on the film that was previously there? Or are you just like basically crayoning
If
color onto
if
things?
there's
Like,
not an episode of How Did This Get Made on this, there should be.
yeah, I might have to look into something like that.
I'm sure somebody explains it somewhere, and we're just this is one of the things that we should know
Be-
going into this.
because the color photo looks very real. It looks like it has a lot of light shine and stuff on it. That's very.
But I mean,
It look.
really, not to be a skeptic, but I mean, there's a lot of dots in the rest of the picture that just aren't as illuminated. I don't know.
No, I mean, my thing. I was gonna say, putting these two together, I have questions because in the first photo, it doesn't look like. If you look at just the straight up black and white photo, which I assume the more something zoomed in, the more it's edited, right?
Mm,
Well, because well, to the extent at least that it's zoomed in,
well, yeah,
because they're not adding parts to this picture. So, like in this first photo of the module, let's call it, this which is the most zoomed out, where you see the most of the photo. There seems to be like some light flash.
a little bit.
So you don't you just it's not like anyone's trying to hide something. It's just like you're taking a photo out of a window on a spacecraft against a metal thing against the planet's surface of the moon, and then on the zoom in you notice immediately that there's some sort of negative effect going on, like they've they've made stuff much darker. You see what I'm saying? Because you see these
Yeah,
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bars, and you can kind of follow those on the actual module, and you
yeah,
can see how they've like darkened it, which it may be in an attempt to make the lunar surface brighter, but in any case, you're already doctoring the photo in some
yes.
way. And then when you get to the color one, which appears to oddly be somewhere in between the two zoom ins.
Yeah, and it's not really color because that shuttle isn't just completely just grays primarily.
I
It's
mean, it probably is. This is like metal from the 60s, right? It's like it's gray and it's
mm,
gold. That's all they had to work with.
I mean,
And you're looking at the moon. I know it looks like fake, but I would
yeah,
say that that color looks real to me. So
You're probably right. So I don't know. In that case, then I don't know why they're black and white to begin with. I don't know. I don't know.
Well, when you're looking at the color one, okay, those look like they're in some geometrical pattern. Actually,
Kind of.
that's probably the yeah, kind of.
The bulk of them do. Then there's a couple outliers that are bigger.
It just doesn't scream to me like this is obviously an air base. This is
And I mainly
obviously
just pulled this one as of the photos that he had. This seemed like the closest example of what he was talking about in this crater.
right, right. I mean, the third one's the most convincing to me.
Yeah, and it's also the most enhanced.
Yeah, right. I mean, gosh, in nature, it's hard to get straight lines that good. I'll say that. I
Yeah,
mean, I don't think this is nothing. I mean, that is
because all
pretty
the other
weird.
little lights that you see across the surface, they're not really arranged like that in what you can see in the rest of the photo.
But I don't think there's as many lights as you're saying. Like those are clearly lights.
Yeah,
There are brighter parts of the photo, but those are just brighter parts. These are
and
like
they're all
standing.
together
These are
like that.
standing out in bright parts of the photo. So what
Yeah,
I would like to know, I'd like to talk to someone at NASA or something and be like, if you're taking a picture of the dark side of the moon, why is any part brighter than any other part? And if they could tell me, well, that's a peak or a valley, or that's because of the mineral composition, like that's what I would want to know. And then depending on what that explanation is, I could look at this photo and say, well, what are the odds of that explanation lining up so well in straight lines? Because those are some pretty straight lines.
yeah.
Um, I don't think there's nothing there. There's something there that should be explained. But again, like you said, the best photo is also the most enhanced photo. So
Yeah.
it's I don't know.
And we're gonna get to some other ones. I want to wrap up about Ken first, though. So, in the face of such criticism, Ken has nevertheless become almost legendary as a NASA whistleblower and a champion of disclosure. And over the years, his claims have gone even more into the fringe, such as that there are bases on Mars, and that he has been hypnotically regressed to learn that it was in fact aliens that had told him to defy NASA and come forward with his strange findings.
You go, my man.
I know, right? I was like, cool. This has understandably brought a lot of attention to him, both by ufologists and conspiracy theorists, as well as skeptics, who have constantly challenged Johnston's claims, even as controversy surrounds him. Uh, One of the red flags that has come up is that Johnston has increasingly claimed that he is an actual astronaut, which is false. And he has been found to frequently misrepresent himself and blow up his own credentials, also sometimes labeling himself as a former chief trainer at NASA, all of which has gotten him into a lot of hot water with NASA and the State Department. Which, I mean, I don't know. I could go both ways on this part. Like, the paranoid part of me that doesn't trust NASA or the government at all is like, yeah, they would say that if one of their top guys is out there letting a bunch of secrets out now, wouldn't they?
Here's my rule on those types of claims. And also I'm so seeped in the paranormal at this point that I don't I don't necessarily hold this type of thing against the guy. But my thing is like you can kind of tell when something like that's a lie based on the fact of don't even think about NASA. Don't worry about NASA. When was the first time that he claimed to be the chief trainer? And
Oh, yeah,
if you just focus on
recent
his
years.
claim, yeah, if you just focus on his claims, then it's like, well, bro, I that would have been a pretty good thing to mention in 1970 instead of 2003. You know what I mean?
Or in the
Like,
90s.
yeah, exactly. It's like he's obviously it's obvious that even his own if you don't even worry about the official story, like his own story seems to be growing.
A
And
little bit.
that's kind of a good indicator of like what might be going on here. Now, also I might get to this at the end, but I'm getting real heavy disinformation vibes from I have from Hoagland for a while, and also this dude. I'm getting, and whether it's them or they're being fed things from other people that they're like, oh, this is awesome. I got to let it out. Like something's going on here where they're like overly confident about what they have, and it seems to me like they might be being giving they might start with Johnston, and then he feeds it to a person like Hoagland, but like the real source of the misinformation is someone at the government. And then it probably just drives you crazy, which is probably the point, is to drive you crazy, to give you stuff that's fake, and then to watch you put it out in the public, and then to watch you just melt down. That's like a real thing that we know the government does.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I mean that's one of their main moves is any kind. That's kind of a false flag sort of.
Yep. Yeah, it's like a false flag on a person. It's real.
It's very Gladio of them. It's very Operation Gladio of them.
Yeah, exactly.
Um. So okay. So he's also made some pretty extravagant claims that have been seen by skeptics as questionable at best. One is that he is, quote, a doctor of metaphysics and he has a diploma in it. And his colleague, Brett Shepard, who often accompanies him to lectures, has also been a controversial figure within the UFO field.
Well, first of all, that doctorate, you could probably get that from a lot of places.
Yeah, but
yeah, all right.
again, this didn't pop up until later in his life too, and at this point I was just like, all right, I want to talk about some weird pictures that he had.
All right, let's talk about some weird pictures.
So this one was arguably one of the best, I think. So this is from Apollo 12. This is astronauts on the moon. And this is a picture of one of them is shooting at the other one, essentially. You can see here, you can see in the reflection on the visor, the astronaut that's basically taking the picture of the other astronaut. So this is Ken talking about his experience with Richard Hoagland and kind of how they started finding all these anomalies. So he says, at 8:59 a.m., Richard walked through the door of my home with 3 members of his staff. I had taken my archive out of a very large, double-door, 5,000-pound safe that I had acquired to keep them and other valuables in. They were amazed that I had kept every picture in its own document protection sleeves. I knew that keeping them safe would make them last longer. While they were looking over my collection, my wife, Fran, called their attention to a picture that seemed to have something reflected in the astronaut's visor on the moon. Everyone went wild. They couldn't believe how clear my first generation pictures were. They started seeing things that before they had only guessed at. When I told Richard that I had donated a complete set to my alma mater, OCU, because of the value my archive was to prove whether or not there was something on the moon, he offered to send me to Oklahoma City University to retrieve the only other complete set outside NASA and bring them back so that we could use them as the control when necessary to prove something was or was not visible on the moon. So they went on to decide that they had discovered basically something similar to, again, he's a real big Star Trek fan.
Yeah.
So there was something called the Tribble Station in Star Trek.
Yeah.
And he basically thinks he sees something similar to the Tribble Station in the visor of this astronaut. That's what that other glare is up there on the top right.
I see the glare.
Now, I will note that the more I've been looking into stuff, there is a lot of weird crossover stuff that seemed to be happening with Star Trek and NASA at the time. Like, they were talking. And
yes, they were. Yes,
Star Trek was definitely getting ideas from stuff they were hearing from NASA. So I kind of say this kind of tongue in cheek with this, Matt Jeffries' Tribble Station, but also they were talking to people at NASA while they were writing that show.
I'm a big Star Trek fan. Oh boy, I are we on the second picture yet that we're looking at? That is the zoom in
Yeah,
of
yeah,
the.
that's what I'm talking about.
Um, it's a lot of suggestion. That's
I mean, when you compare it back to the original, it almost looks like a smudge in the original when it's not zoomed in. But upon further detail, I do kind of see, I do see the main body, and I do see the two of the arms.
man, you would.
I have a, and I can't explain the shadow that it's pointing out there either. That is a shadow that isn't connected to anything else that's going on that should be able to be
Yeah,
reflected.
you're right. My
And based
question
on the light on the visor, the light's coming from, I believe, the correct direction to create that shadow.
now, I guess my question would be, I'm trying to look back and forth between these two images. So one is clearly the first one that's just like the original photo is clearly like a photographic print.
Yeah, and you can find this. This is a very common photo. Like, you can find this one pretty easy.
Now, our man's in our man has already admitted that he uses Photoshop. Now, I'm not saying he created this fake, but this is like a zoom in using early 90s digital technology.
Yes, midnight.
And
Yeah,
one artifact that you will always have from that, even on normal today's digital technology, is that it's going to take it's going to take light things that came into a camera, and it's going to place them in digital bits, or like you know what I mean. So like
yeah.
when I look at the original, it does not look as artificial or as like it,
See, I can still
it
see in the
looks it looks
original.
like a smudge became, to me. I'm just guessing.
Yeah.
It could still just be a zoom in of the original, but it looks to me like a smudge became more of a figure due to zooming in with like binary digital technology. Like it made more of a amorphous shape into more of a square shape,
Yeah.
which like would give the illusion of like it was created by something. Now, that being said, obviously it's not the triple station, um, but that is some very large object that is reflecting light, no matter which photo you're looking at, and
Mm-hmm.
is that's very strange.
Mm-hmm.
Like for being on the moon, the moon
Yeah.
does not have moons. The
Yeah,
only
it looks
guy,
like, yeah, the moon has a moon.
yeah, it's very weird. I can't believe I've never seen this before. That is very weird.
So there's that. I want to move on to an even more puzzling photo, and that's from Apollo 17, in which you can see a figure in the background. We have an astronaut in the image and an astronaut taking the picture. What is in the background there? They claim it to
That
be
is a
some sort of an apparition.
They claim it to be an apparition.
That photo that we're looking at is literally that's what they had written up on it on their slides or whatever. Apparition.
What do they mean by apparition?
I couldn't find any of their lectures on it specific. I'm sure I could probably track them down, but I didn't listen to like hours and hours trying to figure out what they were talking about with this one. This is just their little
That
notes
looks
on it.
like a person.
Yeah,
That looks like a person standing on the moon. That is
yeah. But there would have
whoa.
only been two astronauts on the moon at that time, and there's somebody taking the picture, and the other one is with the moon rover in
And
the
this
picture.
is a Johnston photo.
Yes, this is a Johnston photo.
Oh boy.
And if you
Okay.
scroll
Well,
down a little bit, you could see again, it's very pixelated when it's zoomed in, but it doesn't go away. It still has the shape of some sort. Actually, the original is easy. I think easier to see than the blown up picture.
Yeah, that is,
It looks
and
like
it's
an obese
reflecting light.
astronaut.
Yeah, that is weird,
And this
man.
is not the first time, remember, that we've seen figures on the moon. China had that thing, remember, that we covered a few months ago on the show, where there was the figure on the moon that had the shadow and everything. That looked like some sort of a being out walking around on the surface of the moon.
Yeah, it's like a little moon man.
There really is a man
It's
in the
like a
moon,
little
Dennis.
moon man, like a little moon man. Oh, that is weird. Yeah, that is weird, man. Like I can see. First of all, I'm wondering what is that perfect. It looks like a river. Like ignore the person. Like what is he standing in?
I don't know. I wasn't even paying attention to that. I don't know. It is,
Like it looks like whether it has water in it or not, it looks like an ancient river, which might be part of that whole like moon magma river thing we talked about in Genesis
yep.
Revisited. But like it,
But
that's like a weird like feature.
But it isn't that much darker. If you look, okay, so the foreground where the actual rover is, that's a very dark surface right there. Then it goes light, then it gets dark. That could just be that essentially happening at a further distance.
Correct, but assuming that the shadow is craters basically,
Yeah.
what you
Well,
have in the back, assuming the shadow is created because you're in some depression of the moon, or earth or whatever.
I don't think it's a shadow. I think it's darker colored soil.
No, I think that's shadow.
Okay.
I think that's shadow. I think that it looks like when you look at a picture of the moon, you see the darker spots. That's
Yeah,
craters. I think what you're seeing is craters because the light. There's no atmosphere on the moon, so
that's
like the
true.
light
Yeah.
is different. What you're seeing there is like is like a canal, basically. You're seeing like a canal, but then there just happens to be some sort of glowing person in it. That's very weird, man.
Yeah,
That's
it's like
cool.
white with a little hint of blue, like light blue maybe around what would
Yeah,
be a waist.
that looks like some sort of organism, possibly a person.
Yeah.
That's very weird. Yeah.
So there's that. This one, I'm not sure. This was in their slides, but I couldn't figure out which Apollo mission this was actually from. But so take a look at this first picture. It's You can see the shuttle.
Well,
There's
that's
a
a UFO.
UFO out in the distance.
Yeah.
Scroll down a little bit further. We're gonna zoom it in. And then this last photo they included, I don't think this is from a NASA photo. I think this is them giving an example, which to me looked a lot like the Nazi UFOs that we were talking about a couple months ago too.
Yeah. This looks like those are some very real looking photos. The first two. Oh
Yeah.
wow. Um, there has been talk. Maybe you'll get into it. Maybe you won't. That's fine. But there is talk of Apollo astronauts talking about being followed while they're around the moon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And this would seem to corroborate that. That is a very real looking photo of, yeah, UFO basically.
Yeah. I don't know what else that would have been in the mid to late 60s.
It's kind of imperfectness too. The fact that it's not like perfectly drawn, like really adds to the authenticity that it would be part of a photograph.
Yeah.
That the light wouldn't show up evenly. Like, because if I was going to add in the 60s or otherwise, if I was going to add a UFO in a photo, it would be much more uniform.
Yeah.
It The fact that it glows off different angles really, it adds to the fact that this is something they saw. That's
This and the apparition, I think, were the most and that's why I included them, are the most two convincing photos that they had out of I forget how many there were. There was a bunch though. And
yeah,
the link will be in the show notes or whatever on the sources page if you want to go through and look at all of Ken's photos. A lot of them would just look like the light picture that we were talking about earlier. Like it's stuff like that where it's like Yeah, I could see that being that. There was some that went very far, and I didn't include it, where somebody has like pointed out like this is some sort of like a statue that's fallen over. This
Yeah.
is like some sort of a wall. Like I didn't get into those, like because really, when I saw them drawn out, like with their notes, I saw what they were saying, but then when I looked at the unedited, untouched photo, I didn't really see what looked like these shapes and walls and all that.
Right. I've often wondered if maybe like I'm not able to see it without the drawings and that's something wrong with me, or maybe they're just crazy people. But like this this UFO one is very convincing. The apparition is also very
There are two where
God
I'm like, I don't know how you explain either one of them away.
gosh, the apparition one, I keep going back to, I mean, the UFO is huge, but we know stuff followed them. We have like actually a few photos of stuff following them.
Well,
The
and like voice logs or whatever where they're talking about lights and stuff
Yes, that's what
coming
I
around the
mean. That's
shuttle
what
and
I'm
on the
talking about.
backside of
That's
the moon.
exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah, like they knew lights were following them. The apparition one, I mean, if I had to be a skeptic, I'm just like tempted here. I would say that's somehow a mirage of the astronauts themselves because it does look very astronauty. Um,
How that I mean, that's somehow even creepier if that's what that is.
yeah, but light can do weird things, and
I
we're
don't think
talking
it
about a
can do
place where light doesn't act the way it does here because there's no atmosphere.
that's true.
So, like, you could get if you're and remember you're talking about a camera. This wasn't necessarily seen with the naked eye. You're talking about taking a flash photography on a place with no atmosphere. It's bouncing off against the sky in a place where there's no sunlight, and he's in a pure white suit. And maybe that's what they mean by apparition. Is that it's that first guy there who's like
I
taking pictures.
guess, but you would think you would see something of the rover or anything else. He's not that high elevated above the rover that he's taking a picture of. It doesn't seem like.
No, no, you don't. And oh boy, man. But then again, I mean, you do see like that streak there next to him, which could be the rover, right?
Eh.
I don't know. That looks like there's and man, if we talk about this alien stuff being like apparitional and somewhat, you know, paranormal.
And we have talked at different points about how some of this may be some of that, where there is uh other dimensional thing happening.
Right. This might be like a little like gotcha thing that they did to NASA, where it's like, whoa, look at us.
I mean,
That is
stuff
very
like this,
weird.
it kind of seems like you would almost need to be planning to be there.
Right, right. No, no. Or you followed us and you're a UFO and you're like, let's go play some tricks on the ground. Like, let's make one of their photos show this weird version of them in
A
the
1960s photo bomb.
yeah, right, exactly. It's a photo bomb. And same with this UFO stuff, you know, it's like it's probably lit up like that to be seen. I mean, that's what we know from UFO stuff and modern.
Honestly, you know what? When I saw what the shuttle one or whatever, I honestly that it made me more think Nazi or Marconi. It made me think of Marconi too, and the crater people, the volcano crater people in South America that also may have free energy UFOs,
I love that you're going down this.
and we're supposedly using it to like travel out into the galaxy about this time. This would
Yeah,
have been not that long after they were doing this. This would have been 25, 30 years.
this would right. They would look
And
like
the
an
70s was when those
old-fashioned.
people were coming out and talking to the reporters and stuff about this hidden city. I'm not saying it
Yeah,
is, but it lines up, and this looks like one of those UFOs that the Nazis had,
I
which
think you
would have
might.
been what the Italians were having about that time because they were all kind of doing the same thing about that time.
I think you might be nailing it. This might be some fascist UFOs here, probing NASA, making sure we ain't going too far, playing some tricks.
I'm gonna.
Looking at Star
I
Trek.
mean, you've heard of, and I think we talked about it a little bit when I did the esoteric Hitler. I think I mentioned it that it's thought that maybe the when the UFOs hovered over the White House supposedly in like the 50s,
No,
late
they
40.
did. That happened. By the
Okay,
way, yeah.
I think I mentioned that on the esoteric Hitlerism episode. That some people think that that was actually the Nazis showing up to be like, "Hey, don't come down to Antarctica. Don't come down to South America. We got these. Mess around and find out."
I never thought about that. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Like that was just that. We all know the Nazis like to show off their cool stuff. They were definitely ones to brag for sure.
They like to do it big.
They did. Um,
Wow. Wow.
so I kind of think that's what that. Honestly, the more I've thought about this and looked at these pictures, I think that's what that is. Those.
Oh man, but what does that mean? Because I've never, you seem to be going down more of the Nazi route. This will be an interesting dichotomy in the show. You seem to be going down more of that route. I've never really bought into that. I think it's more something supernatural. So, but if the Nazis had the technology to hover around the moon and like follow us there back in the 60s, then they'd basically be capable of everything else involving UFOs, right? I mean, it could just be that simple. It could just be people.
Yeah, it could be.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's just,
Again, I don't think it's all people because we go back to again with the Marconi stuff and everything. People were finding crashed UFOs and then like reverse engineering them.
what
I
if
think
that's
that's what that
what
is.
if that is what if that is time travel? Either intentionally planning technology to help yourself. It always happens to be the Nazis. It always happens to be, or I don't know. It,
It could be. I mean, I that is a very viable theory in all of this is that somebody's time traveling, just crashing stuff, and then having other because a lot of times we supposedly they get crashed, but there's nothing inside of them a lot of the time.
that would be an interesting way to solve the time travel paradoxes where you're worried about what you would tell people from the future, or you're worried about like affecting things. You could just like drop a Walkman back in the medieval times and like see what happens.
Yeah,
That could be what UFO crashes are and why there's never, or usually not any like alien bodies, and why even the FBI said in their reports that were released this last year, there's no bodies to most of these crashes. It could be their way of being like, please take this, we'll see what you do. And it's their way of like messing with history without like messing with history, because like the worst thing that could happen is like the people that are friendly to you are more technologically advanced, but you don't have to worry about people interfering with people. You don't have to worry about any of the other things about time travel. You could just have all the advancements without that. That could be what the UFO crash is.
yeah, that
All
might be
right.
all it is.
That might be all it is us trying to seed ourselves.
That would be a very human way to do things too, wouldn't it?
Oh
It would.
yeah, like if I wanted to give Amazonian tribe technology, they shoot their arrows at stuff. I would take a plane, I would take a drone, and I would put matchsticks and like a card wheel and some stuff I wanted them to figure out. I'd put it on the drone and I just drive the drone into the ground, and then they would have it, and they say, "Oh, the gods brought us the matches," and then we just see what happens. That
Yeah,
might be what UFO crashes are.
that might be what's happening. That might be.
Yeah. Well, anyway, this is a great episode, by the way. Thank you.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. We're gonna get into more of actual stuff happening on the moon or with the moon, or
Cool.
other people covering it up. There seems to be a lot of effort to hide what's going on the moon, though.
Yeah, there does.
Lot of hours spent, lot of sleepless nights making sure the average person does not have a clue what's actually happening on the lunar surface.
It's a shame.
I think there might already be everybody up there. We may not be trying to publicly make moon bases because there might already just be moon bases up there already.
Yeah, you get that vibe that the White World Space Program is just like doing the bare minimum. And that was actually making a lot of sense too. Why we like never went back to the moon after the 70s, because you're like, oh, there we go, we did it. Leave us alone. And then we've been talking since the Bush administration has been like, let's go back to the moon.
Yeah,
And that was 21 years ago.
and we were able to do it in the '60s, so it's not a technology issue at this point. Like we're just
Why
not
haven't
going.
we're just like, we're putting you off. It's like, okay, girlfriend, whatever your name is. Yeah, I'll take you to Cheesecake Factory later. It's like this empty promise, like we're
Yeah,
going back to the moon, and it's like it never happens. Yeah, I mean, obviously, ooh, and if yeah, the whole thing might have been a show, and then it might not even matter if us and the Soviets and everything were already meeting with the Nazis to go through the internet. It might just be a big show to like keep. How crazy would it be? Let's say there was an advance that was like 400 years in history, which is like never happened, but like that's what we're talking about. Like in the 30s, we got the technology to basically go into 2400. To be a leader, to deal with that information, you'd have to have a ton of secrecy, and you would almost have to like create history from that point forward. You'd be doing everything as like a show.
mhm,
Uh, you would have to have people die. You would have to just like walk through history. You'd have to edit stuff out to be like, oh, just like forget the actual moon base we have. Like everything seems in alignment with like time is not right. Whether it's time travelers or we took a big leap and we can't let people know because they get mad. Like time does not seem right when we talk about this stuff. Like
yeah,
something's wrong. Something's wrong. And we're definitely covering stuff up like literally sometimes when it comes to like photographs. We're we're just trying to walk people through like a scripted version of history because we've already gotten so far. I guess is what I'm imagining. Gosh, mind blown. Thanks, man.
yeah.
Gave me a big realization this week.
Good. I hope everybody enjoyed it. That's it for this week. That's what I got.
Oh, good. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for listening. Please like, share, subscribe. Give Pat some love. Stop leaving him the nasty comments I've ordered you to leave in previous episodes. Give him some love. Um, you can no longer be ashamed of this podcast because we have grown to the point where you don't have to be ashamed about that. We have a good subscriber list. We have a good listener view. Like, let it go, baby. Share this with your mom and your dad and your sister and your girlfriend and your boyfriend. Let it go, man, and send us some messages. Like, we are a ship that's about ready to take off, and I think this will be a very good addition to that catalog. So thank you, Pat.
Yes, thank you everybody for listening. Thank you for doing it with me, Dennis. And until next week, bye. Love you.
Love you.